Welcome. I'm glad you can be joining us for a 1001 New Worshiping Communities kind of conversation that we have with Candice who kind of put together our training. That's our boundary training that can be found on our website, newchurchnewway.org, which is the 1001 training platform that we have. And so I'm excited to have a conversation with Candice tonight. So Candice, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to us so we kind of know your background and what you're a part of.
Absolutely. So I am the founder of 2 online therapy practices. So we do coaching and counseling at the Christian Closet for LGBTQ Christians. And pretty much progressive Christian counseling is for everyone else. So, but a lot of people that are in the deconstruction process that are trying to figure out what do I do when I want to experience God, but not in the traditional sense? And what does healing look like outside of church, perhaps? So I'm the lucky person who got to have these begin, and I have a team of 15 therapists, and we do it all online.
All online. That's 2 years ago, 3 years ago, who would have thought of online? But here we are doing therapy online.
I know.
And so we're excited to have you and have you be a part of this boundary training that we really created, and you created it all, and we filmed it with our team, and we're kind of excited to bring it to you. Can you tell us a little bit about why boundary training is even important, and kind of what you kind of created for us?
Yeah, it's so important. And even as I was creating it, I was thinking, ooh, boundaries. Like, who likes boundaries? Like just the idea, I think we have lots of false ideas that boundaries are really ultimatums. That it looks like, if you cross this, I'm not going to be in a relationship with you anymore. Mm-hmm. And so there's kind of like an edge that can come when we think about boundaries. Yes, that is boundaries. But a boundary also is like when you emailed me for this and I said, oh, I can't do this date, but I can do this date, right? That's a boundary. So there are lots of ways of setting boundaries that aren't so harsh and like an ultimatum. And when we can realize that, actually the key to connection with another person, the key to keeping ourselves safe, the key to keeping those in our congregation safe is boundaries.
Because I think when we think of boundaries an awful lot, we think about boundaries in our own personal life. Like, hey, I shouldn't be talking to that person because they're leading me down the wrong path, or whatever it might be. We think of it often in our personal lives, yes. But in a professional, like as pastors or leaders within a church, we don't think of these boundaries. We often. So what are some healthy boundaries, and what versus some things that we're like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be like. There's some pastors I know that it's like they put boundaries up, but they're like, I'm like, whoa, those are some strict boundaries. Those are like really tough. So what are some helpful things for us to kind of really think through in boundaries?
Yeah, in fact, in one of the videos, I kind of joke about how we want our boundaries to be like Baby Bear. We don't want it to be like Papa Bear's bed where they're too solid and hard, and we don't want them to be like Mama Bear's bed where they're too soft, right? So we don't want someone who can't say no. I remember growing up in the church, my mom was always exhausted. Why was she tired? She didn't know how to say no to the church.
Exactly.
She was constantly there, and she just ran herself ragged. That did not help her relationship with God, with herself, or with others.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of an example of someone who's having a hard time saying no. Then there might be someone like you're talking about, someone who maybe a pastor or church planner who people are like, man, I can never get to know this person. Yeah. They're too busy, or they're always like, oh yeah, next time, let's do that. And there's this sense of kind of like a walled offness. So that's someone who might have some boundaries that are a little bit too solid.
Yeah, and I think like when I went to seminary, a lot of the times they would tell you that you can't make friends or have real authentic friends in your congregation because you're always the pastor first. And I remember all the different walls of different pastors that I've met saying, no, you really can't know me because I need to keep that distance, that spiritual distance. And how tough it is, one, for us as pastors not having authentic friends that really deeply know me and care for me. And then for the congregation to really know me as opposed to this persona that I create for a Sunday morning.
Yeah, which doesn't really create a place where they can be themselves either.
Yeah.
It's incredibly lonely for you as the pastor and isolating, and I would say not great leadership, but that's even the kind of training that I got as a therapist. You're the kind of the blank slate, you don't have anything personal, but I've been a therapist for almost 20 years, and what I have found is to be the most effective way is to actually just be a human with someone. Let myself be known. It doesn't have to be about me, but I get to be in the room with you. And the same is true, I think, for pastors. Like, you are a person. You're a person who wants to be known and who wants to know other people.
Yeah.
How transformational is that? Like, that is beautiful. That's the whole point of, I think, why we have churches, is so that we can experience God between the two of us. And if you're leading that and people don't get to know you, kind of hijacks it.
Yeah. So here's a kind of a question. Are boundaries the same for every single person? So would it be the same for me as it's the pastor of, say, First Presbyterian Church in Pasadena, or wherever? Are all the boundaries exactly the same? So it's like, this is what the boundaries are for Sean. This is what the boundaries are for this person, and everyone should have the same boundaries. Or how would you explore boundaries for each of us?
It's such a good question. And I really wish the answer was that all the boundaries are the same, because I could put them on like little note cards and memorize it, and then we'd be good to go, right?
Exactly. Then I know exactly what I can do.
Yes, except for it doesn't work that way. And so I think the very first beginning place in boundaries is learning about ourselves, getting to know ourselves. So sometimes that comes in therapy, spiritual direction, but getting around people who can reflect to you, like, who are you?
Yeah.
And you doing that internal work. So you might be someone who's like, man, I don't know, I just stay up late, right? I'm just a night owl. And so for you to say yes to maybe going and visiting someone in the hospital late in the night would be a perfectly fine boundary. But someone who, man, if they stay up late one night that week, it just wrecks the whole week.
Yeah.
They would want to say, yes, I can do that, but here's when I can do it. I can't do it tonight, but I can do it tomorrow morning because I'm a morning person. And so the importance of knowing ourselves, even like those little gut feelings you get that sometimes are really easy to ignore. Like when you get that gut, like, oh, that's something to just kind of pause and pay attention. Like, oh, why did I have that feeling when I was talking to that person? Or why did I have that feeling during that meeting? What's going on there? It's probably likely that there's some kind of adjustment that needs to be made for you, boundaries.
Here's a question that oftentimes we skirt those boundaries. Like, I know the rules of different things. I'm like, I'll push myself right up against those rules and those boundaries, and I know where the gray areas and where the gray area stops. But for some people, boundaries are difficult, and sometimes we cross those lines of boundaries. How do we get ourselves back? Crossing the boundary doesn't mean it's the end of our ministry or the end of whatever. How do we get ourselves back into a healthy place from an unhealthy place?
Yeah, gosh, it's so hard. And I would say that the temptation probably is to have a harshness towards ourselves, to judge ourselves. And yet that is the very thing, a harshness and a judgment is the very thing that's going to make it really difficult to get back to a place of health and a boundaried space. Self-forgiveness, self-compassion, finding a space inside of yourself that lets you be human. Also, make repairs. It's okay to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Wow, I was unaware, or I thought I was doing something right and good, and I just wasn't. I didn't know.
Okay. Yeah. So you've created this curriculum. So there's 5 different modules with worksheets that help people go through there. So it's kind of helps you walk through a variety of different things in the boundary training. So when you get to the end, do you know it all? So what happens when you get through module 5 and you've done the worksheets? What kind of the question is, what's next?
Yeah, that's a great question too. You're good at asking questions. My hope with this training is that it's going to start to create a structure for you to think in. It's not going to make an entire building. But once you have that structure, you can start to put piece by piece on that. So it's going to give you a good starting place to know why boundaries are important, how they're going to help your ministry, how they're going to help you, both you and your congregation thrive, because that's really what you want, you know. We all want those that we love and that we lead and pastor to be happy and healthy and have great relationships with themselves and with God.
Yeah.
And boundaries really is the key to that, in a kind of a crazy way. It really is. So yeah, it's going to give you that structure.
Okay. So what kind of, my question is kind of one of my final kind of questions is so we have this boundary, this whole boundary training. What is some things that you want? What are some key things out of anything that anyone learns out of this? What are like one or two things that you want to make sure that people know?
You know, what I want people to know is that how we were raised by our caregivers greatly impacts how we live as adults. That's for good. Like, I have amazing things about me because of my parents, right? But there's also places that I've needed to heal through and grow through. And I think sometimes as Christians, we don't want to necessarily look back. But looking back is very important to see those places we need to grow and work and get deep so that we cannot continue to perpetuate those same lack of boundaries or too much boundary, right?
Yeah.
So that's one big thing. I think the other huge thing I mentioned earlier, and that's self-compassion. We are all humans. We are imperfectly doing this. And so the more that you try to be perfect as a church planter, I think the less effective you're going to be. So to allow the imperfection to be there and for it to be okay.
And then finally, how can people kind of follow up with you if they have questions, or they're like, we want more, or even if they're like, hey, maybe I need to talk to a therapist, or I need to figure out some of these different resources. What is a good way to kind of contact you and your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check us out, thechristiancloset.com. We have a contact page on there, and you can just fill it out and say, like, I saw your boundary video. I'm the one who gets those emails. Progressive Christian Counseling, we have a website also, but usually easiest just to go to thechristiancloset.com. I also have Instagram. I am lesbian therapist on there, which is kind of a funny name. I'm even on TikTok. So I'm on all the things, but our website is the easiest place to contact me.
So thank you for the conversation. So again, if you as you're looking into this, our boundary training, there's 5 modules on our website, newchurchnewway.org, and it comes with worksheets and everything like that. That's been developed by Candice, and we're thankful that she's with us. And if you'd like more information about that, you can either contact me, sean.chow@peaceusa.org, or you can reach out to Candice as well. She'd love to hear from you. Well, thank you for this conversation this evening.
Thanks, Sean.